Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex. And today I wanted to go into a bit more depth about the discussion and assertions that I had about Hulk based on the previous video, yesterday's video for Thor Ragnarok update kind of pre-event details. So if you don't know what I'm talking about in that video, I'll give you a brief synopsis. I essentially said that Hulk is going to be getting a uniform, a Gladiator Hulk uniform, and on top of getting more damage, actually getting more damage out of his skills, I also indicated that I think Hulk needs to get a rework on a lot of his skills because they're very plain. They basically all look the same and they basically all do the same thing in terms of movement, in terms of lack of effects, and that really hurts the character. And I compared Hulk to Quicksilver at the time, who, although he has the same appearance of skills, if you go to all of his skills, they don't have any text except for Not Yet. Not Yet has some buff effects, but that's all. His other skills don't have any text whatsoever, but as we know, Quicksilver is far and away a better and more effective character than Hulk. And while that shouldn't be the case based on the comics, there's also a little bit more going on in terms of how Netmarble designs characters and how we see them in comparison to how they actually play out. Because even from this page here, or even from the patch notes, what you see is not necessarily what you get. And while these damage numbers may seem impressive in terms of the percentage, so 193% of physical attack, 152% of physical attack, those don't actually equate to very large numbers in some cases based on the number of hits and based on other factors. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to take Hulk today and I wanted to compare him to another character, in this case Sin, to show you guys some examples of what I mean of good skill design. And I know that Sin is a little bit different than Hulk. First of all, she's a speed character. Second of all, she does have a buff on her third skill, Rapid Handgun, and she does have some iframes, but other than the iframes, her skills are very similar to Hulk's in that they have no effects, and they do have some impressive numbers, you know, 272%, 273%, but sometimes bad numbers like 85%. However, if you've played these characters as much as I have, and if you have them at tier 2 as I do, you'll find that Sin actually does more damage than Hulk, which is a bit confusing. If you go to Hulk's skills, if you go to his actual physical attack, you know, he has almost 21,000 physical attack with this setup, with his own leadership. Sin, on the other hand, only has 16,000 physical attack. But in this case, and when I play them in World Boss, Sin does substantially more damage with her skills than Hulk does. And you might ask yourself, well, why is that the case? Well, there's a couple of different things going on that make Hulk deal less damage. For one, a lot of his skills, and we can show in the skill preview what I'm discussing, a lot of his skills only hit once. They only have one hit in them, and so all of the damage is just being concentrated in one hit. So if the enemy or if the boss has an iframe, or if they dodge the attack, or if they have high defense from a buff at that point in time, or if you miss and you hit a mob or something like that, all of your damage is gone. And that's a really big important factor. In addition to that, having a buff effect really goes a long way, because instead of buffing one hit, as you can see here, this is just one hit. This is, again, just one hit. So his first two skills are only one hit each. That's 2 hits in 2 skills. His third hit, oh, look at that, is 3 hits. So we have a total of 5 hits over 3 skills. His fourth skill is a little bit more. It's another 3. Oh, it's actually 6. It's a total of 6. But as you can see, it does take a long time to get through that. And chances are you're not going to be able to get through. Even with my attack speed being almost 130%, I can't sit here and wait for Hulk to actually get through all of these animations. But in addition to not being able to get through all of these animations, if you actually pull out a timer, and I'll wait for all you guys to find your Casio watches, time how long it takes Hulk to get through just this one skill. That's right, your watch says, damn, that's a long time. That's how much time it takes. It actually takes, damn, that's a lot of time for Hulk to finish this skill. And that is really drastically dragging down his damage, because all of the damage from that one skill is stretched out over this time. His fifth skill is also similarly animated. It takes a really long time for those 5 hits to register. In total, you're looking at like less than 15 hits for Hulk over all of 5 of his skills. And I know it's a little bit different with some of his other uniforms, but this in general plagues the character as a really bad thing, as a really negative aspect to his character design. And while I did praise Netmarble for having the actual look and the feel of Hulk, it's not quite there, and I'll give you guys an example later on of why it's not quite there. But in addition to not being quite there, it just makes Hulk very difficult to use effectively on the offensive side of things, because like I said, if you miss, if you get dodged, if your buff doesn't, trigger for all of these skills, or if you get interrupted midway through a skill because the enemy iframes or they move out of the way or something like that, it drastically reduces his damage. And while Netmarble did fix Hulk's survivability, and there's no question in my mind that Hulk is one of the toughest characters in this game, so at least they have that down. The damage does need to come up, and it needs to come up in a more transparent way, because to this day there really isn't a good way of figuring out from the patch notes even whether a character is going to have powerful skills or not. If you rewind back to the Sinister 6 update, I expressed concern that Vulture would be a bad character. Turns out Vulture's the hardest hitting character, deals the most damage out of all of the Sinister 6, maybe except for Sandman in some cases. But if you look at his skills, if you look at the damage numbers, you really can't tell. And that's something that's always been hidden behind code and hidden behind, under the hood of the game. And I would like there to be a little bit more transparency in terms of how we can figure out whether a character is going to hit hard with a skill or hit softly with a skill. Maybe some kind of grade. It's grade 1 to 5 on the skill or something like that. I'm not sure what it would be, but I now want to give you the example of Sin, so that you guys can see, even though we can't see the damage numbers, you can see that the skills animate differently. They're much faster, and it's much harder for the opponent to take advantage of things like dodge, moving out of the way, and my buff effects are much more effective on this character. So I know that Sin's 4th skill is an iframe, so we're going to ignore the fact that it's an iframe, but it's still a 4-hit skill. But you can see that those 4 hits happen in pretty rapid succession. She gets those 4 hits off about twice as fast as Hulk does on his 4th skill. So if we compare those two skills, it's pretty important to see that Sin gets all of her damage done in a fraction of the time that Hulk gets his damage done. So if they're doing the same amount of damage in both of those skills in terms of raw numbers, Sin actually has a much higher damage per second because she's getting it done in half of the time. So you can go through other skills faster. If you run out of skills, you can even auto attack, you can switch, things like that. But instead of, focusing on her 4th skill, and instead of focusing on her 3rd skill, which is really just an iframe with a self buff, I want to focus more on her 1st, 2nd, and 5th skills, because those are the ones that are going to illustrate my point to you about skill design and why, although Sin is not a better character than Hulk, her skills are definitely more well designed and just better when you're playing them, and more fluid than Hulk's. Whereas all of Hulk's attacks are just forwards, they just move in one direction, and they just kind of push faster and faster and more into the enemy. Sin's skills are a little bit different, and I'm actually going to move away from this enemy and I'm going to go to another enemy so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So her 1st skill is pretty straightforward, but you can see already that there's a difference. Even though I start at 12 o'clock here, if you picture a clock in your head, I end up finishing off at around 8 o'clock or almost 9 o'clock. So there's innate movement in the skill that allows me to, dodge incoming attacks if I can trigger it properly. It allows me to set up combos more easily and kind of juggle enemies a little bit better without being interrupted or without pushing them into a place where I can no longer hit them successfully because of barriers or environmental hazards. And that's really important. And also, it's fast. Those 3 hits get off very, very fast. And so even if you miss part of the skill because you have to interrupt it, you get those first 2 hits off immediately. So if you press this 1st skill, you're guaranteed that damage, at least for the first part, even if you skill cancel. In Hulk's case, if I skill cancel his 4th skill with those 6 kind of slow flailing hits, I'm losing the damage from those other hits that I canceled out to go to another skill, and I'm never getting them back. Let's look at her 2nd skill. Love this skill. Lots of movement, as you can see. This is almost a complete 180 around the character. She ends up, if she starts off at 12 o'clock, I think she ends up around 9:30 or 10. Yeah, She ends up around 10. So almost a complete 180 back and forth. And in addition, you can see 6 hits. And if you time it, that's 6 hits in a very short fraction of the time. Now, this skill will do less damage than Hulk's kind of slower plotting 6 hits from his 4th skill. But still, if you calculate the damage numbers, the chance to crit, and then if you calculate the overall time that it takes to do the skill, this skill is much more effective at dealing damage to enemies than Hulk's 4th skill ever will be. And in addition to that, I get innate movement, which is kind of like a third or a half of an iframe if you want to think of it that way. And I also get the added bonus of, you know, keeping my combos up. If I'm trying to skill cancel, I can skill cancel into other moves and still get some of that damage off to keep my damage per second up. And then finally we have her 5th skill. This is probably the only skill that kind of relates to Hulk because it's slow, there's lots of hits, and there's not a lot of movement. And this is the only skill of Sin's that I dislike for that reason, but it reminded me a lot of Hulk skills, so I wanted to show you guys what that was like and why it's easy to see the parallels or lack thereof for these two characters. So she starts off with a rocket hit, she moves, she hits, and then she jumps back and snipes. So in total, it's a little bit less than 10 hits because I had some pierce to some of these enemies. I think it's about 8 hits. There is a bit of movement, but the movement just happens in one direction once, and then she stays on that plane. She stays on that 3 o'clock after she moves. I think it's just once from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, roughly, maybe 2:30. And then she stays there. So this is a really bad skill for a couple of different reasons. For one, it takes a long time for these 6 hits or 7 hits to get off. It's 6. It takes a long time for these hits to get off, so most of the time when you're playing this character, you cannot wait for this animation to finish, so you do not get the full effect of the damage. And while we discussed when we looked at the character, wow, 200% damage, yeah, that's 200%, but you're not getting that full effect because you have to skill cancel half the time. Half the time I get off one hit of this skill and then I have to cancel into another skill, otherwise Sin is going to take damage and be in trouble and be vulnerable to basically getting one-shotted because she's a speed character. So most of the time it's just rocket and then move on to something else entirely. In contrast to that, although her first skill deals less damage, I find myself more inclined to use her first skill because it's so quick and it deals those hits so quickly, and then very fluidly I can just jump into other skills. So I'll give you a full skill rotation now so you can compare Sin and her rotation and how she looks when she's fighting an enemy versus Hulk. Keep in mind the enemies are not going to be stationary the whole time, but if we just take a look, we can just go very straightforwardly 1 through 5. You're going to see that there's a totally different character who's jumping around, doing things with her skills, and, you know, racking up those hits fairly quickly. Now in contrast, our big green hero is a little bit different, and I gotta go get his uniform, otherwise this isn't going to make sense. And now let's rotate through Hulk's 5 skills. Again, it feels very Hulky, but as you can see, it's just push you in the direction, jump up and down a little bit, and then just smash, 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 smash. Now, I wanted to leave you guys with one character that I think does encapsulate Hulk more than Hulk, which I didn't think was possible, but I had him on the team the whole time here on the left side, and that is Black Dwarf. And I said this from the moment that I saw the character released. This is what Hulk should have been all along. Now, Hulk is actually more tanky, has more toughness than Black Dwarf, so Netmarble did rectify that problem, but in terms of damage, in terms of savagery, in terms of overall badassery, and in terms of how their skills animate and look and feel, this is what Hulk should really be. Jumping around, huge effects, the ground getting destroyed, lots of hits in quick succession. This is what Hulk should be, and you can see how quickly these skills rack up. That's 11 hits faster than Hulk got 6 hits off. The only slow skill that Black Dwarf has is his 5th skill, but it's still a very good skill, and it's got a very satisfying animation to go along with it. If Netmarble took a page out of Netmarble and they designed Hulk's new uniform in the same light or in the same kind of perspective, or even a more extreme perspective, that they designed Black Dwarf's skill set with, and if they apply that kind of attitude to Hulk, I think a lot of people are going to be very, very happy with the character. But I do know that this character is beloved and hasn't really gotten the treatment that he deserves for a long time in this game, so I wanted to highlight this in a lot more depth than I usually go into, so that one, you guys can understand where I'm coming from and why I say things like, oh, his skills are good, oh, her skills are bad, oh, their skills are really good, etc. And why just the damage numbers really don't give you much indication of the skill or its effectiveness, and why you do need the skill preview and why you do need to test these things out and retest in order to get a really good idea of how good a character is. Because I'm sure, myself included, a lot of you didn't know how good Sin was, and I didn't even show off the damage numbers in a world boss or something like that. But now you may, you know, be aware of those things and test them out for yourself. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your thoughts are on Hulk and where he should stand in the game in terms of power level. Subscribe if you're having a good time, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.